Hey y'all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we're checking out something rather quirky. It's the iTour D-Lite, which is a dual-screen translator. And so the concept is if you're holding it in a position like this, you're able to see your language, and then the other person can see the second language, and you're able to converse back and forth a little bit more freely compared to a normal phone or a normal translator that has just one screen, and you have to kind of pass it back and forth and flip it around. This might make that interaction a little bit less awkward, but still it's kind of an extra design. Having said that, the hardware is rather unique and makes me appreciate that they're at least trying something a little bit different. Now, the part that surprised me the most, though, is that what looks like two screens connected to one hinge, maybe one processor, one battery, is actually two separate devices. For example, the primary panel here on the front measures 5 inches diagonally, and it has its own CPU as well as memory. And then on the back here, this 3-inch display actually runs on its separate processor as well as battery. It's just held into place magnetically as part of the design. My initial reaction to this was I felt like this was a little redundant. I mean, yes, it's kind of cool that you can use it in so many different ways if you want to be even further from one another. At the same time, I can't help but wonder, since there's 2 sets of batteries, 2 sets of processors, 2 sets of essentially the same operating system, that probably would increase the cost of the hardware a little bit more, and maybe for the sake of efficiency, it would make more sense to have just one set of guts and just a screen kind of attached permanently to this hinge. But as it stands, this is actually not bad. It's currently selling for around $200 on Amazon for, again, rather quirky hardware. Again, it's technically running on Android operating system on both sides, and it claims to translate over 130 languages using a combination of various AI translation engines, including from Microsoft, Google, large language models, and there's also 17 languages that it supports offline, even when you're disconnected from Wi-Fi, which is built on in. However, this model is going to be Wi-Fi only. There is no SIM card slot or cellular capability. Now, aside from voice translations, this one also features a built-in camera if you want to scan in documents, billboards, menus if you're traveling and on the go, and also comes with a built-in AI assistant, which is all the rage these days, allowing you to ask questions kind of like an alternative to something like Gemini, for instance. Again, designed really for just communication by using a variety of different language models to supposedly give you more accurate results. Plus, in certain regions and places around the world, for example, in mainland China, Google services are actually banned by the government, and that's why, for example, Google Translate will not function. So it's going to be able to intelligently switch into the best model based on regional compatibility, compared to if you're using it on your phone, you might have to download multiple apps and do all the switching yourself, by saving you some of that effort and time. However, you do have to be someone that does a lot of translation work, I think, to really take full advantage of a dedicated device like this. And here's the full list of supported 139 languages. Feel free to pause there to read through. And I will say that some of those languages, though, are dialects or versions of a single language for various regions. For example, Spanish, broken down into variants spoken in Latin America, South America, Mexico, as well as English, different accents as well, including the UK, Ireland versus New Zealand versus US, instead of the 139 being completely unique languages. Now, in terms of battery life, we're talking about a 2000 milliamp hour capacity cell on the main section, which is guaranteed to function for around 6 hours continuously when you're translating, fully charging up in around 90 minutes, with the rear display having slightly less powerful specs, as you can see here. However, it's really just programmed and optimized to work in the translation modes, instead of being like on a smartphone where the specs would definitely be more low end, even if it is running on a highly customized version of Android underneath the hood. But here it is next to something like a typical phone, around 6.3 inches. You can get the idea. It's still relatively compact, pretty easy just to travel with. And inside of the packaging, aside from the iTour D-Lite, you'll find just some basics inclusive of a USB Type-C charging cable, a quick user guide, and that is more or less it. And because the 2 sides are again completely detached from one another in terms of the guts, it does mean that you have to charge the 2 sides separately. So for example, if the back part here runs out of juice, you have to pop it off from the hinge here and then find the Type-C port for charging located on the very top. And when detached, it is incredibly thin and lightweight. Almost reminds me of something like a credit card in terms of the form factor. You have just a loudspeaker on the very top. So just keep that in mind. If it's not turning on, it probably means the battery inside the back unit here needs to be charged up, compared to on the main unit, again, having its own battery, which is a bit larger, needs to be charged separately here on the bottom. But I guess their argument is by having 2 sets of processors, it's kind of similar to parallel processing, where the speed might be a little bit faster as you're translating between the 2 languages, is because the task is being divided across these two processors, it makes the experience maybe feel a little bit more smooth, although they could probably achieve the same effect if they chose one faster processor inside as well. Anyways, on the rear here, you'll find the 5 megapixel camera for scanning in documents, for, again, photo translation. There's a little bit of a latch design going on as well that can secure the back screen into place, prevent it from falling out, and when it clicks into place, it automatically turns off. You have separate power keys for the small screen as well as the main screen on the front, in addition to factory pre-applied screen protectors, and located on the edge here are also going to be 2 sets of translation buttons. So you can press on one for your language, the other person can press on the second one, or they can use the touchscreen to also tap and hold, as well as controls on the front as well, providing 3 ways depending on your preferences of where you want to click. Now, the main frame of the translator is crafted out of polycarbonate plastic, but it doesn't feel overly cheap or flimsy. It has a decent density to it. That being said, just keep in mind there is a screen on the back. Again, both of these are IPS LCD panels, so be a little more careful when you're setting it down. If you drop it, there's glass on both the front as well as the back. Now, in terms of that hinge, you're able to, again, flex it out as much as this, and to their credit, the magnet on the top is actually pretty robust. So it doesn't feel loose at all when you're holding onto it. You can even give it a slight shake, and you can see it's not falling loose. In fact, if you gave it to someone that didn't know it was a detachable design, they probably would think that it's permanently housed as part of the hinge. It actually feels quite robust and sturdy. And so moving into the software experience next, we can drag down here to change volume controls as well as the screen brightness. It's generally quite good. It is a fully laminated panel. Now, if you're outdoors in direct sunlight, you may have to crank it up a little bit higher compared to some flagship OLED displays. Now, unlike a smartphone, you won't find Google Play services nor a web browser in the default launcher, focusing on the translation capabilities. So the first tab here is the online translation mode. You're able to choose between various languages, and you can swipe here on the side to search through the full list. Additionally, we can tap on the top section here to go into a split screen view, which is kind of an alternative, I guess, to using the dual screen mode. So if you want to just only use one display, you can still hold it like this and have the screen kind of split in half, see 2 languages at the same time. And in this mode, it takes advantage of the side controls a little bit more. Hello, this is a test of speaking in English. Can you hear me?
Hola, esta es la prueba oral de inglés. ¿Puedes oírme?
Sí, y puedo hablar un poco de español también.
Yes, and you can speak a little Spanish too.
Instead, if you're using the other layout, the 2 languages are going to correspond to the 2 hotkeys down below. So this side is going to be Spanish, this side is English. Unless you want to flip that around, now the 2 controls here will also reverse. So for example, let's try it one more time using this alternative view.
Vamos a intentarlo de nuevo con esta vista alternativa.
Y un poco de español una vez más.
And a little Spanish, once again.
Using the other key, as you can see there. So not bad in terms of the overall layout. So that is the online translation mode. Now, if you want to use the primary and secondary screens on the front and back, we can tap on this red tile, and the 2 screens will be connected to each other, though you do need to activate both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth if you are trying to pair these 2 screens together. So that might be a slight con in terms of power efficiency compared to just a completely attached screen. The interface, though, is quite similar to before. We're able to see the 2 languages and also change between the languages on the very top. So here is one more test using the dual display mode. How does it work?
También hay una prueba que utiliza el modo de visualización dual aquí.
And well, again this is a Spanish test 1, 2, 3.
Holding it in the split screen view, or even placing onto a table if you want to have this conversation mode between 2 people, it might be just a little bit more comfortable. Speaker is also quite loud on both sides of the translator, and on this tiny half you can tap on the settings icon to go into more advanced controls, connecting to Wi-Fi, checking for firmware updates, font size if you want to make it a little bit larger versus smaller since it is a smaller screen at the end of the day, in addition to the offline package memory. So again, if you want to take this with you on the road, even if you're not connected to Wi-Fi necessarily, you can download these language packs. You can turn the screen on or off. Compared to on the larger screen, it's slightly more complex. Again, a slightly faster processor on this end allows you to access a few of the other controls compared to the smaller screen being a little more simplified. So we can also check out the photo translation mode here next. Once again, we can choose the language on the very top. So for example, English into, for instance, Chinese. It is an autofocus camera. Just tap to focus and then snap the image. You can also crop, and once satisfied, it will then be able to convert it into the translated text version, as we can see here. And you're able to use pinch to zoom controls as well to see the translated result up top. You can see all the previous images which are stored on the system's memory down below here as well that you can tap to see, as well as preserve a text version that extracts just the, again, sentences for you to read back if you prefer this view instead. So you can choose between those options. Otherwise, you can find a offline translation section, which is separated, again, based on the offline language packages that you've downloaded into the system's memory, working decently enough, although the offline translation accuracy, I would say, is a little bit lower compared to the online translation that tends to be a bit more accurate, just because it gets more of the jargon as well as conversational context compared to offline. It's more like a dictionary translation, word for word, perhaps sounding a little more robotic compared to the more natural translations that you can achieve using the online mode. But if you're just using simple phrases like getting directions, getting food, then the offline mode is still going to work perfectly fine. But I would say it's maybe around 85% accurate compared to the over 90% of the online mode. So if you're recording longer conversations and passages with more difficult grammatical aspects to it, then perhaps using the online translation mode will give you higher accuracy compared to the offline mode, although it still picks up the voice and converts it into text without too many issues. Microphone sensitivity has been working pretty well, as you can see here.
也许使用在线翻译模式会给你更高的准确性相比。
As for real-time translation, the difference here compared to the previous one that we saw is that this is actually translating second per second. So here's another example of the conversational mode. As you can see, we are translating in real time, and the text will appear in the secondary language of your choice without having to really wait and have the machine process the text later on. So this might be better if you're in a meeting and things are moving a little bit more quickly, or you want to have a back and forth conversation without waiting, then you can use this particular real-time mode instead. And something else that's kind of interesting in the simultaneous translation mode is you can tap the top right-hand corner to generate a QR code, which you can scan on your phone if you want to preserve the results of the real-time translation, downloading it as a copy, providing you a quick way of wirelessly extracting the results, kind of like meeting minutes, which is a neat idea. Now, there's also a phone translation mode. Again, generating a QR code you can scan with your Android or iOS device, and from here the two devices will be linked together as long as they're connected to the same Wi-Fi network, and you're able to speak back and forth between the translator and the phone, kind of using this instead of the secondary screen on the back of the translator as another option. Right now I'm talking using the microphone on the phone. How does it sound?
How does it sound?
As you can see there, after a split second, we have the result popped over on the translator as well. On here, there's a little bit more latency compared to using the second screen directly. Seems a little bit faster, but it's still functional. Now we can tap over here also to select language once again. And in this particular interface, you can also pull up the virtual keyboard. Again, really revealing that it is just running on Android underneath the hood. There's even swipe support as well, as you can see there, if you want to type it in instead of speaking. So here's another test speaking using the translator. And there we go. After a split second, you can see it pop up on the phone side as well, which we can tap here to read back. It can be an interesting way to communicate as well if you want a more private chat group, maybe between some friends as well as family members. We have a similar, again, UI on the web app here for changing the language as well that we saw on the translator as well. So that is the phone translator mode. Now, to be completely honest, before I jumped in, I assumed that it would be something a little different. Perhaps instead recording a phone call or some type of text message and then converting the language from the call or the text into the secondary language. But instead, it seems to be more of a private chat group, but still being used in a similar way as the other modes that we saw from before. There's also the AI Xiaobei app, which is the large language model. So if we tap here to go inside, you're able to ask questions similar to ChatGPT or Gemini. There's 3 sections: an AI role, in which the model is prompted to act in a specific scenario, for example, a legal consultant, a CEO, a poet, a salesman, a HR manager, a random password generator. You can see the prompting here provided as reference, again, using lowercase, uppercase, length, randomize, and generate a password. Stylist, florist, philosopher, all of those are kind of different profiles that you can trigger and kind of converse back and forth with the large language model. You can also create your own role by assigning a name as well as setting the prompting for it to act in that way. Let's try out the philosopher profile and ask something. What is the meaning of life? And after a couple of seconds, you can see it then generate the response. Not bad in terms of speed, and you're able to ask follow-up questions as well. You can even activate kind of a real-time conversation mode in which the AI will speak back its responses to you, and you can have a back and forth conversation that feels a little bit more realistic. It's an equal blend of eerie and somewhat useful based on the scenarios that you're in, maybe if you're training for an interview or ask more domain-specific questions. There's also a more general kind of voice conversation mode that doesn't really apply a specific role, so it isn't as customized. What's a good one-day itinerary when visiting Seattle?
Here's a friendly and efficient itinerary to help you make the most of your day. Morning, Space Needles.
In addition to an AI writing tab, which allows you to generate a simple template or fill in some basic information in the form of a brainstorming, agenda, marketing plan, email, story, poetry, article, even video script, so on and so forth. Let's try a story, and you can write a general description about what the story is going to be. For example, let's try sci-fi, a very broad prompt over there. Using this framework, and we can further polish it, expand it, continue writing, or refine it at the bottom there as well. So not a bad idea. You have some of those basic properties. Now, if we tap on the very top corner here, you can also check out your profile. Taking a look at your historical records, including in the conversation phone call mode, you can also visit a text version for reading back out, preserving a copy here. What I will say is it looks like some of the structure of the replies in the AI mode could still use a little refinement. For instance, breaking up some of these into more distinct paragraphs as well as bullets. But of course, you can always prompt it to further add additional steps in terms of summarizing it, but by default, it looks something like this. Now, the voice that it uses to speak out loud can also be adjusted between a male voice.
I am your exclusive AI.
I am your exclusive AI.
Compared to the female voice, and you can make it slower, faster, or normal in terms of the playback speed. That being said, like many other ChatGPT-powered AI devices, if you're using it more in terms of the volume of requests, then there are paid options or tiers available. Now, you don't have to necessarily pay if you're only using it infrequently, but if you're conversing with it daily for hours at a time, usually these models are based on the quota or volume of requests. So if you go over a certain threshold, again, just like activating Pro tier on ChatGPT or Gemini, there is going to be that subscription model available, but just for general use, it still seems fine. And perhaps most importantly, all of the other translation capabilities don't require any subscription to use, which, speaking of, I feel like the integration with the AI part could still be done in a slightly more intelligent way. For example, there doesn't seem to be a huge synergy between the translations versus the AI function. For example, perhaps you've recorded a meeting conversation and you want to then summarize it into bullet points, or then further elaborate it and create some type of draft email. Then it would be nice if you could take those recordings and previously translated results and apply the AI feature on top. Whereas right now it looks like this is more of a separated app altogether that you use to ask more general questions instead of being able to import some of your previous files. Now, on the second tab, you also find some basic utility functions like a world clock. Exchange rate conversion can also be found between other, again, global currencies. As long as you're connected to the internet, it's going to refresh the data, as well as a basic unit converter can also be found for length, volume, weight, and temperature. So some basic tools that might be useful when you are traveling and on the go. There's also a language learning mode here. And the UI is still very similar to the normal translation function, but instead you can tap on this arrow key to slow down or increase the speed of the translated result. So for example, if you're trying to learn a secondary language like Chinese, Spanish, you can then see the phrase you're trying to learn, slow it down, and then repeat after the phrase a couple of times until you've mastered it. And then you'll be able to see a score being represented in terms of the pronunciation, if it was close or not. It's not a bad idea. That being said, I think it would also be interesting to include some additional functions like a dictionary, as well as perhaps some structured courses that you can access maybe online or download for learning the basics, whereas right now it's really designed for just specific phrases that you're trying to learn and then testing your pronunciation, so perhaps more for advanced users, a little more ad hoc, but still nice to see. And there's also a group translation function as well, so if other members in your family or friends pick up the translator as well, or scan to be connected using the QR code, you can actually add more than just one device, creating a larger group similar to Slack or Microsoft Teams, and all the conversations in this particular group will be translated into your language when you're reading it back. Other people can reply in their own language, and you'll be able to see it, for example, in English. Last but not least, the Smart Recording tab here is kind of interesting because it allows you to save the entire conversation as an audio clip in addition to seeing the translated results at the same time. So it provides you with the real-time transcription as well as the translation, and the audio recording using the microphone are all going to be stored by the device. So after a couple of seconds, we can then tap on save, and then over here you can then tap to play back the audio recording. So yeah, not bad in terms of all the core functionality that we can see. And jumping into more advanced system settings, again, you're able to turn on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, as well as checking for any system updates. So overall, pretty simple and straightforward. So there we have it. That is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the iTour D-Lite. Kind of a funky play on words there. This is a dual screen, again, translator with some AI features thrown into the mix. And I think the hardware here is definitely quite interesting. The concept is not bad. If you're holding it out like this, it just makes it a little bit easier for the second person to see the translated language. That being said, it might be a little bit overkill if we're being extremely practical. In some cases, again, even the primary screen can already be split into two halves, which serves a similar role. Plus, because we have basically two sets of processors, two sets of components across the two detachable sides, it also means you have to charge them separately. There might be a little bit of redundancy there going on, but to their credit, the overall processing speed across the two screens does seem to be pretty responsive and fast. And I guess the viewing angle between the two screens is a little bit more comfortable using this kind of tiltable display. But generally speaking, as a translator, this is actually a pretty well-performing unit that offers a little bit more innovation from a hardware perspective. So if you're in the market for a dedicated translator like this as a road warrior, you're constantly engaging with other kind of foreign languages, you can check out more details in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the iTour D-Lite AI translator.